Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro Adventures. And at the end of another week, the end of another poll, we've got a very definite win for Judgment Day for the Judge Dredd role-playing game. Now as usual, I'll cover that on the desktop in a wee second, and I'll be back at the end of the video with some other poll-related stuff and some other channel-related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been advised have the most contagious smiles which light up the room. And that's because these are incredibly generous individuals who I have difficulty showing gratitude for their generosity because they help support this channel and make things ever so much easier. Now, if you'd like to join them, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to help the channel out, or you'd like to become a real honest-to-goodness fake Laird of Scotland, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'll be very much appreciated. Anyway, let's have a look at Judgment Day. So, this is Judgment Day, spelt the right way, because I've always been annoyed at Terminator 2 Judgment Day not having the E in it. It's always bothered me, but Judgment Day. It's an adventure for the Judge Dredd role-playing game. It's by Games Workshop and it came out in 1986. And it's one of only 2 adventures that were published, and we've already covered Slaughter Margin, so this is me completing all the adventures for the 1980s Judge Dredd role-playing game. So that's nice to cover. Now, the cover here is absolutely brilliant. I believe it's by Brett Ewins. So let's just have a check. Yep, Brett Ewins did the cover. Fantastic, very reminiscent of the comic strip. Looks absolutely first class. Lots of judges on their Lawmaster bikes, guns firing, explosions. Very, very Judge Dredd. The adventure itself is heavily based around events of the comics, which I'll go into. So it really helps if you know the history of Judge Dredd, especially the early few years, maybe the first 4 years or so, and it really feels part of that universe. It covers a lot of characters who you would recognize from the comics. It deals with the after effects of some of the big storylines of the time. Anyway, let's have a look at the back cover. So, Judgment Day by Marcus L. Rowland. Judgment Day is an intriguing investigation for a team of 2 to 4 judges of average experience, or 4 to 6 newly appointed judges. This package is not a complete game itself. You will need Judge Dredd, the role-playing game, to play this adventure. It's 2 in the morning. A team of judges glides through the deserted streets surrounding the old maze development area, looking in vain for the occasional insomniac perp to arrest. It's a very quiet night, with few of the shift's major incidents catching the attention of the judges as they drift over their bike radios. The mob war is continuing to rage across the northern sectors. Another 2 gangster has been terminated by the opposition tonight. A massive new tower block has been found to be infested with rad fleas. It is presently under strict quarantine while emergency med squads desperately battle to fumigate the building on time. Some crazy citizen has taken it into his head to fire guided missiles at Zoom tube trains as they pass, presumably just for the fun of it. On the whole, though, it's been quiet. Not very far away, a shadowy figure is putting the final touches to a plan that will put the whole of Mega City at risk. If the plan is allowed to succeed, the judges will once again be faced with the threat of chaos and anarchy, when the most evil criminal mind the Mega City has ever known returns to claim what is his on Judgment Day. And it's based around that. Now, the adventure itself is separated because we've got some handouts here. So let's have a quick look through them. We've got a picture of a Tarim Towers block, city block, and one of the floors on it, including the noshery. I really like that, British, getting your nosh, your food. So it's obviously some kind of restaurant, as well as different rooms, elevators. Inside, we've got a map of the surface of Titan Prison Complex, the Megastoria Theatre, where the game kind of comes to an end, an advert for lots of nice Judge Dredd Citadel miniatures. On here, we've got some upside-down reflected messages, which become important towards the end of the adventure. We've got a card telling us the schedule for the Chief Judge, Chief Judge Magruder, where that becomes very relevant at the end. We've got various service records on some characters which are fairly important in the adventure, a synopsis of events, some maps of the surface of Titan, and some maps of some caves on Titan. Kent's Cave. Now, the adventure itself is about the return of Chief Judge Cal. Now, in the comic strip, Judge Cal became insane, appointing a fish as his deputy chief judge and doing lots of things, penalizing judges by making them dress as ballerinas and lots of stupid stuff. But he went absolutely crazy and started ordering the city put to death. So the judges rebelled. But the plot for this, as is detailed in the early sections, so we've got an introduction here, and then we've got the story so far. So it talks about Cal taking over the city, his rule of terror, how he managed it by hypnotizing many of the judges to obey him. Basically, they receive all of their news in the morning by hypnotic imprints into their brain, and he changed that to make them obedient. Now, obviously, once he was defeated, that programming was removed. But it mentions that one of the judges who was programmed to return Judge Cal, his programming was removed, and then he received a head injury later on, and they restored his memories, and that restored the programming that Cal had put in there. So this judge starts working against, and he digs out recordings of Cal's memories and some old technology which allows Chief Judge Cal to return by taking over somebody's body. And the person that Cal chooses, because he's very vain, is one of the most successful and handsome actors in Megacity 1. And his plot is, during the release of his latest movie, which will be about Judge Dredd's Cursed Earth campaign, when the Chief Judge and other high judges are attending, he'll reactivate everybody's programming through subliminal messaging in the movie, and they will kill the Chief Judge and restore him to his rightful position. So it details all that in the story so far. Now, the judge who set up these memory files and recordings of his personality has been caught committing crimes and sentenced to Titan. So that's where that will come in. So we've got the introduction where the judges discover that this judge who received the head wound has been killed because Cal is now tidying up after himself and he eliminates that judge. Now, there's lots of introductory sections, ambushed by mutants, lots of ordinary plot because they are future policemen, so they're dealing with all that kind of thing. But they end up going into the warehouse and they find the memory recording stuff and they find the body of the judge, along with lots of other clues. And this is a large chunk of it. So we've got details here where they bring up the record for Judge Pentecost, which is the judge whose programming was restored. It mentions that he suffered injuries and went through memory recovery. He suffered minor head injuries. He had follow-up medical examinations afterwards. And that doesn't really lead them to much. There's not much information there on why that judge was killed and what this machinery is. But they go and investigate his home, because judges live amongst the people, and as mentioned on the back cover, it's in the block where the rad fleas have been released. So they have to enter that block, breaking quarantine. And in there, amongst his possessions, they'll discover communication to the judge that's been sent to Titan. Basically, he's been informed that Judge Cal's been restored to a new body, but it's encoded, so it won't be clear to them. They'll just know that for some reason this murdered judge was communicating with a criminal judge who's been sentenced to Titan. So they will head out to Titan. And they travel out and they find there's been a jailbreak, that this judge that they're trying to find has escaped along with some others. So they have to travel out onto the surface using robotic mules. It's very much wagon train. They have to set up oxygen tents and things as they travel out, and they will eventually catch up with the escaped criminal judges and find out more. And then they return, having discovered that Cal has been restored. Cal, why did you let them kill you? We could have ruled the megacity. I made you immortal. Where are you? Why haven't you come back to save me? I know you'll live again. So they've got the clues there. And obviously, for him to become Chief Judge, he's going to try and kill the current Chief Judge. And they track this down, they check her schedule, and she's meeting with the Chief Judge of Britsit and various other judges from Britsit. She's going to meet the Tyrant ambassador at the spaceport later on. And she's got bodyguards and all that. And eventually they get to the premiere of the movie. And the programming activates. Later though, when Dredd is preparing for his mission in the movie, something seems not quite right. One of the judges in the background turns to face the camera and revealed to be Conrad Con himself, the world's most famous actor. As the crew are preparing to board the Killdozer, he joins them. For the first time, his badge is visible. It reads Cal. A moment later, he turns to look directly into the camera. A chill runs down the spine of everyone in the theatre as he begins to address them. His voice seems to have fallen in pitch. He is talking slowly to emphasize every word. I am Judge Cal. I repeat, I am Judge Cal. You must obey me. I repeat, you must obey me. Remember your loyalties. I am the rightful Chief Judge, and Magruder has stolen my rightful place. You must destroy her and all those who support her. Then await further orders. And Chief Judge Magruder's bodyguards all succumb to the programming. So the players have to protect the Chief Judge against her own bodyguards, and they've got to try and catch up with Judge Cal in the body of Conrad Con. But they will find through the mirrored messages, which we saw in the handouts, that Conrad Con is fighting for control of his own body. Because Judge Cal has prepared a extremely virulent disease, mentioned in the comics before as Tutti Frutti, and if they just shoot Cal and hit the wrong body part, that virus will be released and kill thousands. So they have to be very careful, and they have to kind of work with Conrad Con in the head of Judge Cal, or Chief Judge Cal. And after the end of the adventure, it talks about the experience, and then it goes through equipment that they use on Titan. So you've got bubble tents, rubber mules, spacesuits, etc. Weapons, how they work, other equipment. What happens afterwards, and ideas how you can keep this going. And we've got sources. So we've got the Cursed Earth campaigns, part 1 and 2, Judge Caligula 1 and 2, the Judge Child 1, 2 and 3. We've got Rogue Trooper, Imperial Earth by Arthur C. Clarke. They Saved Hitler's Brain, The Boys from Brazil, and various other sources. And then we've got acknowledgements and how to make these stand-up figures, which I'm afraid I seem to have misplaced, or I never got in mine when I originally bought it. But it's an absolutely great adventure, hooking into so much of the Judge Dredd history. It really makes the action feel like it's part of the comics. It's a fabulous adventure. Games Workshop was doing such great quality stuff back then. Absolutely knocking out of the park every time. So that was Judgment Day, and that won the poll this week with some 34% of the vote, way ahead of everything else, and especially the joint second place, who both came in on 21%, which was the last War Hulk for the alternative role-playing game, and Operation Rapid Strike for Top Secret. Both fantastic adventures which I would love to have covered, but I'm really glad Judgment Day won, because it's the final Judge Dredd book that I've got to cover. Anyway, in third place on 19% came Out in the Black for the Serenity role-playing game, and way back behind was the Nightwalker The Villy Affair for Millennium's End on only 5%, which, as long-time viewers of the channel will know, Millennium's End's one of my favourite role-playing games, the quality of the products which came out, and I would love to cover that adventure, but alas, nobody else seems to be interested. But it's really worth looking at if you can search it out. But anyway, as usual, all of those are cleared out of the poll, and we've got a fresh bunch in. So we're doing a retro RPG one. And this week I've decided to go with all Shadowrun. Because Shadowrun wins the polls quite a bit, so I'm forced to leave it out every once in a while, so I'm going to let it compete against itself this time. So first up we've got Augmentation, which is by Catalyst Game Studios from 2007. So it's one of the more recent books for it. It's not from the original first, second and third editions, it's from a later version. Then in second we've got Paranormal Animals of North America, which came out in 1990. Now this is the original sort of monster manual for Shadowrun, including lots of creatures which changed. So like humans changed into elves, dwarves, trolls and orcs through goblinization, animals changed and became more fantastic versions. A great book with lots of work on it done by Nigel D. Findlay, who is one of my favourite Shadowrun authors, who was sadly taken from us way too young. Then we've got Prime Runners from 1994. This is a source book of lots of Shadowrunners and lots of stats of people who might be competing with the players. A very useful book for Games Masters. Then we've got the Renraku Arcology Shutdown. Now this is an amazingly good book. It's very much like Bug City, and it's one of the event books, like Year of the Comet as well, where the Shadowrun world changed because there was a major event. In this case, it's an AI escaping and taking control of a massive complex in Seattle and enslaving the people within it. A great, great book. Fantastic event. And finally, we've got Lone Star from 1994. Now, this is a source book about the police. In Shadowrun, it's been hired out to corporations, and policing is done by one of those corporations, which is called Lone Star. And this is the source book which looks into that. And these are obviously going to be obstacles to the players a lot in Shadowrun because they are criminals. Other things going on? Well, over on rpggamer.org, I'm working my way through the Visions TV series. Now, I reviewed it when it came out, these very stylized versions of Star Wars from different countries, animation studios from around the world looking at Star Wars from their own angles. I did the reviews when the series came out, and now I'm working through stats on those. And there's some very interesting stuff to cover in that. And it's going to take me a few months to work through it, probably up to round about the time the Ahsoka series comes out. Although I'll try and fit in Young Jedi Adventures in the meantime, reviewing and statting that out if I can. On the book front, well, there's more books coming out on Drive-Thru RPG and available to Patreons of Laird or Librarian status. So if you check that out down below, there'll be a link over to Drive-Thru RPG. I've particularly published my own game, which you might have seen the rules breakdown for last Friday, where I go through exactly what the game is and how the rules work. But I've been doing other source books which are still the generic adventure building and encounter building books that I've been putting out on there for a while. And finally, Discord. Well, I'm afraid I haven't been as active on there as I'd normally be because there's various things going on in my life at the moment. I don't really want to talk about those on the channel because they're not on subject. But I'm afraid I'm not spending as much time in front of a computer, so my response speed is way down. But if you do want to communicate with me, feel free to go on the Discord, post any comments, any questions, anything you'd like to talk to me about, and I will get back to you. It might just take me a couple of days at the moment, because I'm still working through a few things. But as things settle down, I'll speed back up and I'll be on there a lot more. But as usual, I think I've been wittering on for far long enough, so thank you very much for watching as always. But most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.